Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Fast 10 or Fast X, whatever you want to call it nowadays. Starring Vin Diesel, Jordana Brewster, Tyrese Gibson, Michelle Rodriguez, Ludacris, Jason Momoa, John Cena, Jason Statham, Rita Moreno, Helen Mirren, Brie Larson, and Charlize Theron, directed by Louis Leterrier. Now, before I get into this movie, I will say Justin Lin has abandoned this project because of Vin Diesel reasons, where he will never memorize his lines, and that's no wonder The Rock left the project in the first place. And they hired Louis Leterrier, who I have reviewed before, Transporter, The Incredible Hulk, and let's see how he does here. Whereas people were boycotting this movie, well, not boycotting, but like protesting against this movie being made because of the racing scenes. Let's get into this movie and we'll see what I mean by that. We start off 10 years ago with the flashback from Fast 5, where in Rio we see Hernan Reyes, returned by Joaquim del Almeida, forgive me if I said the name wrong, hiring his son Dante, played by Jason Momoa, to keep his safe full of money safe from Dominic Toretto, returned by Vin Diesel, until he steals it with footage from Fast 5, with Brian O'Connor helping Dom out until Dante falls into the water to become the bad guy as he is, which reminded me a hell of a lot of those three different characters in these three different movies: the Joker from The Dark Knight, Loki from the Avengers, and Silva from Skyfall, which is a James Bond movie, and where he comes off silly like the Joker, but like him, as well as the other two characters I brought up, he makes all the plans to destroy Dom's family one by one, which is completely unoriginal, while it almost feels like the same plot. In present day Los Angeles, Dom teaches his son Lil Brian, or B, or whatever the hell you want to call him nowadays, to drive as he goes on circles like he's doing donuts, and that made me think of why parents or people are protesting against the filming of this movie, which was on my mind while he was teaching his son how to drive fast like kids do today drive in real life, which is a very bad influence. While Dom and Lil Brian get home with his wife Letty, returned by Michelle Rodriguez, and his sister Mia, returned by Jordana Brewster, as well as Roman Pierce, returned by Tyrese Gibson, Tej Parker, returned by Ludacris, Ramsey, returned by Nathalia Menuel, Han, returned by Sung Kang, and Dom's grandmother, Abuelita, forgive me if I said that wrong, played by Rita Moreno, as they have a barbecue while Roman talks about him being a leader for a change, while he makes a plan in Rome without Dom and Letty, but with Tej, Ramsey, and Han. But I do like this sequence until we get a scene with Dom in the garage at his house looking at his car and photos, and sees Brian, the Paul Walker character, when he was alive, when the song from Furious 7 plays in the background. I thought, don't do that. How many times do we need to mourn about Paul Walker, as this was the job of part 7? No other movie as that bothered me in this scene. Dom and Letty see little Brian as asleep and have a nice romantic night until Cypher, returned by Charlize Theron, comes to Dom's house, and Letty hides little Brian while they talk to Cypher about who Dante is, as he takes over Cypher's plan to get Dom from what he did to her in The Fate of the Furious. Until Dante takes over her employees by saying he'll kill their families if they don't help him out. And that's how it happened. And I'm actually enjoying the beginning right off the bat. As the next day comes, little nobody, returned by Scott Eastwood, Clint Eastwood's son, asks Dom and Letty where the rest of the crew at, and they say Rome, as Dante is trying to trap them while Roman's heist plan goes on. Roman's plan, which was too silly for sure, like Tiny Tej, for example, which was very stupid, until Ramsey and Tej get in the truck, and Dante controls the truck, and Tej funds the bomb that looks like the atomic bomb Robert Oppenheimer made, based on what I've seen in the trailers, which is funny in an odd way. But at this point, I'm kind of having fun, and I say kind of at best. The bomb rolls all over Roma until eventually Dom tries to stop it. Meanwhile, Letty goes with Dom and eventually goes after Dante. And while it goes on, Dante drops a sign that motorcycles can't get through. And Letty does a stunt to go over the sign, and I rolled my eyes at that moment over any unrealistic stunt that I'm going to bring up later in the movie. As Roman, Tej, Han, and Ramsey escape, Dom puts down the bomb in the water as he spins it on a hook, and I rolled my eyes at that moment as hard as I could, as well, and it blows up, hurting people. Some people, while the Rome Police Department were stupid enough to arrest Letty to begin with, and make others on the number one most wanted list made by Ames, played by Alan Ritchson. Forgive me if I said that name wrong. And when I first saw him, I was thinking he was a bad guy, thanks to his resume of action movies. And I reviewed this actor a couple of times in the 2014 and 2016 versions of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle films, as well as the Hunger Games Catching Fire. And I'm just going to say now, he got on my nerves after a while. He's visited by Nobody's daughter Tess, played by Brie Larson. And what is she doing here as she deserves better than this movie, in my opinion? And she's an Oscar winner, for Christ's sakes. And they waste her talent in this movie. I mean, geez Louise. I don't like how they used her in this movie at all. Dom, who's now devastated about Rome as Queenie, returned briefly by Helen Mirren, delivers a message about how the world is on fire, while Dom wanted to save his family. And we move on to the next scene with Ames going after Mia, as well as Lil Brian, and captures them until Jacob, returned by John Cena, comes in to rescue Lil Brian, saving Mia as John Cena does a move from the WWE called the FU, which I have seen in the WWE in my lifetime, which was a good callback from WWE days. And he takes Lil Brian to a safe place, and that action sequence was fun in my opinion. We get to Tess at a bar in Naples, finding Dom as he negotiates with her about letting Letty out of the prison, and tells her about Hernan, and finds out Dante is her son, while Roman, Ramsey, and Tej and Han arrive to London by ship. And if this series is good at one thing, it's this: the countries. The way they shoot them at looks nice, in my opinion, and that's what they do with London. Jacob tells Lil Brian about vibration while dancing with Chris Tucker in the first Rush Hour movie, which was kind of amusing at times, while Tess makes a move to get Letty out of her cell by pretending she was attacking Tess, and escapes and puts Letty somewhere else, which was a weird move. And how is that supposed to work? But somehow it did. By the time he wakes up next to Cypher later in the movie, I question that. I don't know how that works. We get back to Rio, and Dom goes to Diogo, who was in the fifth movie, as Dom is introduced to Elena's sister Isabel, played by Daniela Milcor, as she is a street racer, while Elena was a cop in the fifth movie. And Dante shows up as Dom tells Dante he burned his father's money and ends the suffering from Dante. And Vince for Dante and Vince for all, and once and for all, and Dom races Dante, Isabel, Diogo. And before the race, I noticed Dante talks way too much in this movie. And Dom will call it out later, and I thought, get to the point of what his plan is. And the race begins, and the audience learns mid-race that Dante puts a bomb under Diablo's car as well as Isabel's car. And Dom saves Isabel's life by pushing her off the road to get the bomb off the car. And this is kind of where the movie starts to lose me. I'm not checked out of it, far from it. Letty wakes up next to Cypher, and while Dante killed the two guys he betrayed Cypher for, and gives them pedicures. And what was the point of that scene, as it may have been supposed to be in the editing room floor, as it's a little bit too long. But I didn't check the time like I did quite a bit when I did Beau is Afraid. Jacob takes little Brian to a gas station as he calls little Brian Chester, while Jacob calls himself Roger. And Dante steals money from Ramsey, Tej, and Han, while Roman has a backup plan with his money and kept it in Spinks. And I thought, really? While the other sequences feels a little unnecessary, except for Dante putting pedicures on on two dead bodies, which was oddly placed, in my opinion. Dom and Isabel talk about what Elena and how much they're alike, and that was a touching scene, but the acting not so much. Ramsey takes Roman, Tej, and Han to a place she went to before we ever met her, and I'm just gonna call him Pete Davidson, as they pay him, and Roman and Tej fight it off as Roman always talks his way through, and it's just getting annoying after a while. And Tej wins while Han gets high from the muffin that might have had some kind of drug, and Pete Davidson almost gets them arrested. And why is he here? That's another scene that should have been in the editing room floor, in my opinion. Because I'm not a big fan of the guy. I'm not even going to lie to you. Lenny and Cypher escape from being captive and work with each other at first and beat each other's asses, which I knew was coming thanks to the trailer. And this scene kind of gave me nothing. Isabel tells Dom where his lair is, and by his, I'm talking about Dante, which happens to be at the police station from the fifth film. And before he takes off, Isabel demands a rematch with Dom as he leaves for now, and some thugs try to stop Ames from following Dom while he goes to the old police station while Jacob is on the plane with little Brian, and three agents get knocked out by Jacob, and he gets an idea to put oxygen and alcohol in the thing that looks like a plane with wings. I first thought it was a canoe. I swear to God I did. And I was getting another James Bond reference, like that plane, the plane at the end of No Time to Die, which was kind of clever, I would say. Han knocks on the door, and Deckard Shaw, returned by Jason Statham briefly, as they have a fight until the agents come in and they start beating the crap out of them. And some agents also go for Ramsey, Roman, and Tej, and they beat the crap out of them as well, which was a little painful scene to watch. Dom gets to the police station and Dante calls and once again talks too much as he captures Isabel and Ames, arresting Dom and puts him in handcuffs and takes him in a truck while Letty climbs up and finds out they're in Antarctica, which was a BS move to make, in my opinion, which will be even more at the end of the movie, but I'll get there when I get there. Ramsey learns Shaw's mother, Hattie, is on the wanted list, and Shaw doesn't return for the rest of the movie, which was a poorly made choice, in my opinion. Well, I'll talk about why in a few minutes. While Dom tells Ames to buckle up, and Dom does buckle up as Dante shoots a truck down as Dom gets out and sees Dante and Isabel, and Dom goes after her in the same location as the fifth film, with Tess stepping into the picture to get briefly shot in the shoulder. Now, is this a good sequence in the fifth film? Not by a long shot. To revisit it, as my point was, as Dante wants to shoot Isabel, but misses and escapes with God's eye, and Isabel takes Tess to the hospital, and Ames takes Dom to Portugal, while Jacob and Lil Brian are at, but this sequence is more mediocre at best, in my opinion. Lil Brian sees Jacob is working on a car with big missiles to fire attached to the sides, while Roman confesses leadership isn't for him in front of Tej. And this isn't the best acting, as none of these movies have been best acting whatsoever. And to think Vin Diesel thought that Seven would get a Best Supporting Actor nomination for Brian, I'm like, give me a break. Well, anyways, let's move on. Jacob and Lil Brian drive out of the hiding spot with Jacob's project as Dante is trying to keep Lil Brian alive while they blow up the bad cars. And don't get me wrong, that is cool. A cool invention, I'll say. But it gets more and more stupid at this point. And what makes matters worse is Dom jumping down from Ames's plane and smashing two cars with his muscle car and little Brian tries to fix the missiles from being jammed, and as it gets fixed, Dante captures little Brian. It makes Dom drive on the wrong side of the road, and some cars almost get Dom killed. But Jacob saves him by sacrificing himself, and come on, John Cena is going to return to this series resurrected. Well, I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Like they did with Han and a couple of others that I'll bring up at the end of the movie. Don't worry, I'll get there. While Dom speeds up and two helicopters capture his car and he drags them with him, and I rolled my eyes at that point as that was so stupid and unrealistic. Give me a break. Dom tells little Brian to jump from Dante's car to Dom's car, and they get to the Hoover Dam where two trucks surround them, and Dante tells them to run over Dom, while Roman, Ramsey, Han, and Tesh fall for Dante's trap on a plane with Ames, who was involved since Fast 5. And come on, that was absolutely predictable. And Dom drives down the dam while the two trucks explode, which looked pretty bad as they get out of the fire alive. Dante puts bombs on the dam, and he's worried about little Brian while Cypher and Letty get to a submarine being commanded by Giselle, returned by Gal Gadot, gets them on board. And that is where I called BS in the theater, but this one it gets worse. But credits roll to a mid-credit scene with the SWAT team being led by Hobbs, returned by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And that's where I call BS, even louder. Hearing Dante's voice and he says, "Come find him," which is even more BS because there's no way in hell Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson hugged it out with Vin Diesel and Tyrese Gibson after the behind-the-scenes drama of The Fate of the Furious. And this climax felt very incomplete. And I can't believe, and this is just rumors I've been hearing lately, there's two more movies coming from this series involving this story. Why are you doing this? You should have made this the final chapter, Vin. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 5.3 out of 10. Not quite as good as part 5, 6, and 7, but it's better than the other ones for damn sure. As I did like the first half better than the second half of the movie, but the stunts are very unrealistic as this ending is very incomplete, like I brought up a minute ago. Jason Momoa is no Joker from The Dark Knight, Loki from The Avengers, or Silva from Skyfall, which was a James Bond film. As I'm thinking to myself, how many times is this story going to be told? And what is the point of doing a trilogy of the same story in particular, which seems a bit too much? Like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson showing up in the next couple of movies, which in my opinion, after The Fate of the Furious, is a bad idea. Just bad. At the end of the day, the movie was fine at best, but not as good as the three I brought up. And there were some good moments and some bad moments when I rolled my eyes at with the unrealistic crap. But it's a mild recommendation, and if you're a fan of the series like I thought I was before, I went back to the series leading up to my still least favorite film in the series, F9, but this is better than that for sure. So yeah, I don't know why they're doing another couple, but they shouldn't have left it like a cliffhanger like that. It's kind of like it's like what I brought up with Fantastic Beasts at one point. You're flipping me upside down, getting my wallet, getting $20 out of my wallet, and here you go again doing that for another couple of $20. I'm not thrilled about it, but we'll see how the next two movies go. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back, whenever they come back with the Fast 11. Until then, let's sit down, have a nice barbecue with the family.